So I've started this video like I don't know how many times, and it's one of those days. This whole week has been one of those kind of weeks where you just kind of take 2 steps forward and then have to stop, you know. And I find that often happens to me, and I'm trying to see it more of a redirect versus like that why. You know, it's like you go to print something and your printer's out of ink. Or I was trying to print something that had to be the exact size, and this printer behind me is a wireless printer, and I was trying to print for my iPad. And you can't print something, like I can't figure out how to print actual size. Like you can't adjust those types of printer settings on that, and it doesn't have like any screen. So then I had to end up getting on like an actual computer and get on my hardwired printer up here. This one you have to plug into in order to get something to print the exact size. Just weird stuff like that, you know, like this used to happen all the time when I was doing audio work. Like you'd get an interface and it didn't work with this or it didn't work with that, or I got a really fancy keyboard and I was really excited, except for that keyboard didn't happen to work with a version of software. Like it was like the one version of software they had bugs with that they just didn't intend on fixing. And I remember going back and forth with their tech support, and it's just like, fine, whatever, I'll just go back to this other keyboard that I already had that works. Stuff like that, you just, you know, you get all of your... I'll find that like when I'm painting, I'll get like, it'll take me so long to get a reference photo. I don't have the energy to paint anymore. And then I gotta wait to feel ready to paint again. I did a painting this week that I think I've held onto the reference photo for this painting for like a year, at least 6 months. And it was just, you know, it's nothing fancy, just a little practice, because I've been cleaning and I found some stuff that, like I found my watercolor markers, which are really cool. They're called aqua pens. So that's been really fun to play with this week. But I used to find things like having technical difficulties, like something so frustrating, like why can't I just carry through with this? And it seems like, you know, everybody says that like it's not a rejection, it's a redirection, or that's, you know, it's time for you to do something else. And I have found that that's like interestingly true in situations like that. Like I have a bunch of technical projects, and this always happens with a technical project. Like I'll have to solder something, and I'll either do it wrong and then lose the energy to solder for a little bit, because like, I don't know if you've ever soldered something, but it takes quite a bit of focus if it's not like your only thing you do, you know. And it just takes so much work to take that solder back out, and then you're like, all right, I've got to take a break. Plus there's like chemicals involved and whatever. And I like to be really health conscious, so I don't know, I try to be as non-toxic as possible. I used to love to paint with water or with oil-based paint, but like the fumes from that and the paint thinner, having to clean your brushes and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot. The art form is really cool because you can, there's a lot you can do with it. Then I tried acrylic and realized that there's still odor and there's still stuff, so I'm down to watercolors. But I really am starting to like the technique. Anyways, back to soldering. I have all of these projects, but it always seems like I get a little bit further in the project and then I have to stop and do something else, because like I either don't have the part or I don't have this thing or that thing. Like, I don't know if you've ever gotten everything laid out to do something and realize you don't have something. Like, you know, let's say you're building furniture and you get everything together and you realize you're out of wood glue, or you don't have the right size screws. Like, it's a pain. And I have, you know, I used to get so frustrated and disheartened when that would happen, like just be like, why? But I think it's because if I didn't have the breaks that the universe was giving me, I'd become so hyper-focused on that thing that I don't think I would do a good job. Like, I've noticed for myself personally that when I take time and take space from something, I come back and I'm better than I was before. I don't know if you've ever read Florence Scovel Shield's book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. Sorry, it took me a second for my brain to recall that. It's a really interesting book. When you read it, you wouldn't believe that it was like written in the 1920s, I think, like 1929 or something like that. But it was. And I totally lost what I was going to say because it took me so much effort to find the name of the book. She wrote about this guy, because like a lot of life is about, you know, visualization and having techniques that make your body and your mind work together in order to build the life that you want, you know? And there was this Olympic athlete who was like training for the Olympics, and this is a really long time ago, and he was laying in a hammock. And he's like a multi-sport athlete, and he's laying in this hammock, and somebody's like, aren't you supposed to be training? And he's like, I am. And I was like, you're laying in a hammock, what are you doing? And he was visualizing jumping, because he's a long jumper. I believe that's what it was. Or was he a high jumper? I think he's a long jumper. And he was visualizing a successful jump over and over again, and what muscles in his body and would move, and how it would feel to jump that far, and he might have been a high jumper. I really can't remember. I can't recall, honestly, if he was a high jumper or a long jumper. I just know that it had to do with jumping. It's a reminder to read the book again. And so he was using the art of visualization, and this was something he was doing in order to give his body rest and yet also train his body at the same time. Because when he would go back to to the physical activity, he would have improvements, he would be better. And I've noticed that in myself, that the mental practice that I do, you know, when I'm thinking about something is sometimes more useful than the physical muscle memory. Like, muscle memory is really important, don't get me wrong. Like, you want to be able to have muscle memory, but at a point, existing in the feeling of it becoming successful is, I don't want to say more important, but it becomes extremely important. And so I find myself, like, instead of being discouraged by these breaks that I have to take, being like, oh, so it's time for me to do some sort of visualization with it, or take a break from it and do something else, because oftentimes a lot of the things that I'm learning and doing piggyback off of each other. You know, like, I'll be doing, for instance, I had to sand a lot of wood to build furniture, to do the trim. You know, you want the wood to be sanded really well, nice and baby smooth. And that led into the type of sanding that I had to do to prep the guitar bodies I'm building, which has been a multi-year process. And rather than, again, being upset and being like, I can't put things together, I want to do the best job possible. And I am not in a rush to put something together to say that I did it if I don't like how it turned out. I used to do that all the time, try to keep up with like someone else's expectations of what I needed to do for myself. Like, oh, well, this person thinks I can't do it because I didn't do it along their timeline. And the older I get, the more I realize, like, I'd rather enjoy the outcome of the thing that I did than do it on the timeline that somebody else thinks that makes me accomplished for their opinion. Like, there are certain things like you can't make a mistake on, because, like, for instance, guitar bodies, right? If you like this one guitar body I was working on has a really thin coat of veneer on top of it because it's a solid body with, I think I got the spalted maple top. And in order to make sure that you don't sand through the veneer, you can't go over it too many times. You can't use too heavy of a grit sandpaper, and you want to do a lot of wet sanding, depending on the finish you're doing. And I wanted to do a natural finish with rub-on polyurethane, like it's called a rub-on poly, because you can get it in a water base, which is low odor, and it allows the resonance to come through the guitar. A lot of stuff you probably don't need to know. But it was important for me. I spent weeks researching what type of finish I wanted to have on that guitar. And it took a lot for me to have the confidence to approach the body and finish it the way I wanted to. And before I did that, I actually finished a tabletop with the rub-on poly in a similar way. And if I hadn't done the tabletop, which is a flat surface, I wouldn't have been able to do the guitar body, which was a curved surface, correctly. Because there's, like, you have to apply it. Like, I have my own, technique, and I have been working with sandpaper and wood, and stain and, shellac and things like that since I was really young. My grandmother had me doing all of the woodworking around the house. Like, I stained all the trim, and I took care of the deck and the picnic tables and the sheds. And I'm the person who did a lot of the woodworking in the house. And so it wasn't totally new, but I hadn't ever done anything quite so delicate, probably is the word I would use there. Everything else is pretty large and is meant to get a lot of outdoor use, so it doesn't have to be so smooth. I mean, outside of the trim inside the house. And I, assisted in installing all that trim too. My uncle did the majority of the work, but I was the helper, right? I did a lot of strange things, like, that kids don't normally do. Like, I helped roof a house when I was, like, I remember if I was 8. I think I was 8 when we roofed the house. Which is a very freeing experience, standing on your own roof and knowing how to do it safely. It gives you a sense of, like, I don't know, not power, but, presence in your own life, that, like, you don't have to be afraid of this or that as long as you have the correct skills and the correct training. I think a lot about, like, actors and stunt actors who do all of these crazy things, and people are like, how could you do that? That's so intense. But with the correct training, it's a sense of freedom. It's a sense of, like, understanding, like, the limits of what's possible, and it's not some weird, crazy, like, unprofessional thing. Like, it's something that you don't push yourself too far, and you learn how to have more confidence in your abilities in life. But back to sanding and wood and, rub-on poly. I wanted to have a nice smooth finish where you could see all the wood grain. And I decided not to stain it, but leave it a natural color because it was just such a beautiful piece of wood. And it took me a lot of courage, because if I messed it up, you've got to start over, which means sanding it all off, which means the possibility of sanding off the veneer. And you don't want to do that. And so for a long time, a couple weeks, I was really nervous to do anything with it. And then there's like a part of building a guitar where you shield the inner cavities. Actually, I have a bass body right here that I'm working on. And you have to shield the inside cavities. This one was a blemished body for a bass guitar. And you can see there's like some blemishes here. And I expected to not like the wood on this and to paint it and to try something different, but I loved, again, the wood grain on this so much that I left it natural. But I didn't really know anything about shielding. I just knew that I had wanted to build a guitar. And so I tried making my own shielding paint. I don't know, that was an interesting experience where you use graphite and a paint color, and you try to, because it deals with the conductivity of the pickups. These are all things you probably don't want to know. But I found that the copper tape is easier to apply. And I hear, not that I have any of my guitars finished yet, that it helps to, it works better, you know, than shielding paint does. And it's a lot less messy. Although I will tell you that the cuts that you get, because it's really, really thin, are painful. Like, so be really careful with that. But for a long time, I felt really disappointed in myself that I hadn't gotten any of them finished yet. They're all kind of in a different state of needing to get finished. I've got most of the parts and pieces, and you'd be surprised when you're piecing one together, not buying a kit, but piecing one together, or, you know, you buy a kit and you want to upgrade different pieces. There are so many intricate little things. Like, it's not just you buy, you know, a neck or a body and it's ready to go. Like, there's so much work. And building guitars is something I've wanted to do for, like, gosh, I think I got the bug for it about 20 years ago. Like, I was in a place where I was in college, and I was realizing that traditional academics wasn't meant for my, like, I had such a rigorous middle school experience with this teacher who happened to be a Carmelite brother, who for some reason thought we were just little genius children and made us write like 10-page papers in the 8th grade about very serious topics. And I mean, it was like militarized school. Everything had to be in cursive. We were only allowed to write in one color pen. We had to underline things in red with a ruler and highlight them, and everything had to be written out. Like, if the teacher said, you know, just, I mean, we had questions way harder than this, but what is the, you know, capital of Michigan? You know, that's where I'm from. And we couldn't just write Lansing. We would have to write the capital of Michigan is Lansing. And if you didn't write out the whole sentence in cursive, in blue pen, then it was wrong. Even if you wrote Lansing, it was wrong. And if you misspelled a word and you didn't fix the misspelled word, it was wrong. Just really, really crazy levels of, like, discipline. And you couldn't miss any homework assignments, and I don't know, the stress of that in the 8th grade was a lot. And so in high school, I don't know, that's a whole other story. But by the time I was in college, I was like, because I was really excited to get to finally choose my own classes and what I really wanted to learn. And everything just seemed to be not catered to actually educating people, but getting them through a system. And I was just like, this isn't it for me. You know, this isn't it for me. I mean, I still read really difficult books. I don't read fiction very often. I did recently read a piece of fiction that that was read to us as a class in the 8th grade. It's it's a really good book. But I read, you know, predominantly reference books and research books, and my bookshelf is like all nonfiction. Even my books that are about fiction are the nonfiction versions. Like, these are all of the, there's some books on somebody's artistic process of their fiction story, like, which is, again, more nonfiction. Like, I'm interested in learning. I'm always interested in learning, and that seemed to be the opposite of what traditional education was offering me. You know, I had some good classes, but they were so few and far between. Everything else seemed to be so... It seems to be lacking the education part, and just, you know, this... I don't know how to explain it. It just wasn't for me. I wasn't learning enough, and I had a lot of healing to do, honestly, as well. So I find myself more suited for really structuralized trade schools, like when I went to school for audio engineering, it was a dedicated course. It was really short, but you learned what you were supposed to learn, and they were not easy things, you know, like, yes, it can be really coddled to people who don't want to learn very much and they just want to do stuff. But if you really get into it and you really learn and you really, you know, dive into the science of what I was learning, it was so interesting and so in depth, and it was so good for me. But learning isn't about, you know, like having someone else teach you. Learning is about your appetite for understanding. And when I was in college, I was around 20, and I just was realizing that definitely by 21, I was done with the traditional education system, and I thought maybe going to school to build guitars, something more physical, you know, a trade would be good for me, because psychology wasn't doing it. Like, just maybe it was the psychology program I was in. I couldn't see myself becoming a therapist for everybody. Like, I just couldn't see myself going to work, hearing about someone's sad life story, having so much compassion for them, and then knowing that I couldn't fix it. You know, there's nothing I could really do other than try to help that person understand stuff, and then having them come back the next week and not knowing whether or not something was going to be better for them or not. You know, because, like, when you're a therapist, no matter how good of a therapist you are, it's that person's choice to heal or repeat a pattern or let something go. And there's no amount of convincing a person. There is just showing them, and they accept it or they don't. And that was so, I couldn't see myself being healthy knowing the type of person that I am. Like, I want to help you or not be involved, because if I can't actually help you do it, it's just going to weigh on me emotionally. And, you know, I was really, you know, I didn't know the term at the time, but I was really afraid of compassion fatigue, and coincidentally ended up developing it anyways, whatever, right? And then people hear you in your compassion fatigue say something, and it's like, you know, probably like not the nicest thing you've ever said, but you're just like, I cannot deal with lending compassion to another person because I haven't gotten enough of my needs met. And then they take that as who you are, and it's like totally not who you are. It was just a bad day or a bad year. I think that I'm finally getting out of my compassion fatigue, which I have been in for probably 2.5, 3, maybe 4 years now. Just, you know, how many people can you extend love and compassion and understanding to and not get very much in return? And this was the thing that I was like, oh, that feeling of like, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to become a therapist. So I stopped going to school for a really long time. And then when I went back to school, I was like, you know, music, that's it. I'll just become a musician. Life's going to be good. Which, you know, all bardic pursuits, which would be like art and poetry, literature to an extent. I mean, like, when you look at literature, it can be bardic, but music for sure is definitely a bardic trait. Is there to help people heal, and it's there to help people process through their emotions and get through them, and then move on to new things, or to help them have remembrance. You know, like, it's there to evoke an emotion and move on. Not be stuck in that place. Like, I don't know. That's a whole other topic for a whole other day. Like, our society and its take on bardic traits. Like, when you go back to the times where we had like kings and the hierarchy of how people, you know, were treated. Like, the bards were there to entertain people so that they had stress relief, so that the serious things that they dealt with could be dealt with in a more meaningful manner. They were not the, you know, what kings and queens of society. They were not the people that you followed. And now we seem to be following the bards instead of understanding philosophy for real. And I think that that's been a huge issue in why society is not progressing in a more loving way, honestly. But that's, again, a whole another day's worth of topics. I'm going to go back to why I don't know. Anyways, back to my story and what I have learned from my journey. For a long time, I felt really like I can't tell you how many people, talked down to me or said terrible things to me because I didn't finish school, like that I was basically a loser and I ruined that experience, and I was a waste of time, and it was not a waste of time. The things that I learned in college were awesome. I took the coolest classes imaginable. There was this class, Culture and the Holocaust, where I had two different teachers, one from New York and one who is a genius at understanding war strategy. And so I had a person teaching me about the literature aspect, and I had a guest speaker come to my class who, I was just really, really fortunate in that class. And we learned about how the propaganda spread and how people could actually be pulled into believing that being a Nazi was a good thing. How was that even possible? And which I have seen proven invaluable in my life in current situations, if you know what I mean. I had this class that taught the Bible as a piece of literature, and the whole premise of the class was to take the religious aspect out of it. And the guy who was teaching the class was training to become an Episcopal priest, I believe, was the religion that he was in. But we were taught, who wrote what books through the lens of it as a piece of literature, why it was written, the societies that it was written to. Like when you read the letters of Paul to the Ephesians, I actually learned who the Ephesians were and why Paul was writing those letters and what they were going through at the time. When you read the Corinthians, the book of Corinthians, I have been to the church where those people were harbored, and B, I learned why those letters were written and who they were written from, like the physical places. And I've been to the places where these people were writing these letters from, and not from that class for a different reason, but also in college. And I learned so much from a few classes, but the rest of it was not geared towards people actually gaining real knowledge. It was get a grade, get a degree, get a job that did or did not serve you, and that was that. And so from the very good classes that I did have, I learned that learning was more important to me than education. And that sounds like really counterintuitive, but education is a system, learning is a process. And so I decided to not finish school because I didn't want to be a psychologist. And I didn't, at the time, the things that I'm interested in, which would be I'm interested in the effects of sound and frequency on our mood and mentality in our brain, right? And that is, was not like that in 2004, 2005, that was not a field of research that people were going into. Like, even when I was in school the second time around in 2010, it was not something, there was 3 schools in the whole entire country that had even bachelor's or master's programs in that. It's a lot more studied now, but at the times where I was interested in it, it wasn't offered, and it was offered at some of the most high-end schools in the country, that are extremely difficult to get into. And I just was okay, so maybe, again, I could have been frustrated, but it was just okay, that's not for me. And since then, I have found, different things to supplement that that learning process. And, there are sound healing classes now, and this is a really regular thing to do, is to get into sound healing, tuning forks, singing bowls. The camera light just changed really bad. Oh, there we go. Anyways, so all of those things are a lot more normalized in our society now, and would be, but again, at the time where my brain was, looking to get a degree, those were not things that were offered. And so it's getting a degree in that was just really not for me. Or, you know what I'm trying to say? Learning about those things was for me. Getting a degree in those things and trying to make a career out of those things was not for me. And so one of the side offering, the side interest that I had was building guitars. And I realized that going to school for that and doing that every day and making a career for that was also not for me. But having a guitar that I built that fits my preferences, like, because when you get into a guitar, you have like neck profile, which is like the width, like the diameter of the back of the neck and the way that it's shaped. And then you have fret size, and you have scale length, and you have action, which is how far the strings are off of the neck and how easy they are to push down. I tend to have smaller, a bit more delicate hands, and so I often found myself struggling. I did eventually find a guitar from a guy who builds them that fit my hand, that had the right action on it, and I was able to play like everybody else could play, and it was the first time, but he wanted like a stupid amount of money for that guitar. It was like $8,000, and because it had I think it was mother of pearl, or no, it was abalone shell all over the front of the guitar. And it was a beautiful guitar, but it was, for me, it was the ability to play this guitar where my hand felt like it had the same hand strength as a man's hand does. I could finally bend strings as easily as somebody with hands much bigger than mine. These are not guitar playing fingernails, by the way. I haven't played in quite some time because I'm still working on building my guitar. And I was really, down on myself about a lot of things over my life, like what I was able to accomplish, what I wasn't able to accomplish, and other people's perspective of those types of things, oh, you had that and you don't finish. Like when people say, oh, you never finish anything. And it's like, no, you're just not part of my journey of finishing it. Like, you aren't meant to be around when I do, I guess. Because there's a lot of things that I finish. There's tons of things that I have finished, but I'm to the point in my life now where I'm not going to finish things and rush through them and make them turn out not awesome. Like, I'm going to wait until I actually have this skill set and practice on something else before I move forward with something that's important to me. And that's been something that has taken a really long time for me to learn. That it's okay to go at the right pace for you because you're learning things. Like, one of the things that I did, which was, I was considering gold foiling that guitar, and I might still do it with another guitar, but I'm not ready for that, but now I have a nice reflector for my meditations when I burn a candle. I just took a piece of spare wood. Sorry, it's being a struggle to put back. I just took a piece of spare wood and practiced. Now I have gold foil all over my hands. Applying it and figuring it out. I don't know if you've ever seen people who do sign making and they make it look so easy. It is not that easy. It's just really not that easy. And I don't know what would happen. Like, I just, I've done wood burning. All of that is wood burned. And pyrography. I have tried it on leather. I thought that because people do that too, and that's not for me either, but I do like it on wood. It's just very interesting for me. And I think that as like any of us move forward, it's really important to grasp and put in perspective, like, you're not meant to go at other people's pace or other people's speed or other people's storyline. If you really want to be great, if you really want to be awesome, then you're going to go and work on the skills that you're kind of called to work on at the time. And that doesn't mean like be really flaky and flighty and be like, I just don't feel like it today. Like, you really have to know yourself and understand yourself, and know what that feeling of like calling feels like within you, which a lot of time takes a lot of time. To undo the processing of hearing other people's voice in your head and hearing that weird, like, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, or what am I doing with my time if I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that, and really let yourself hear that inner voice for real, and to love it. To love hearing the voice of discipline of, you've done enough of that today. Like the other day, I did 2 paintings. One of them in the morning was of a flower, and it wasn't great. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, painting flowers is something that's new to me. And it wasn't bad by any means, but it wasn't great. And then later in the afternoon, I did a portrait, and it was much, much better than I had really expected it to turn out. And then I thought, maybe I'll do another one. But if I had pushed myself and done another painting that day, you know, my hand would be really tired, and I wouldn't be, because painting isn't my full-time thing. Like, if painting was my full-time thing, then I would paint more hours of the day, you know. But that discipline of being able to know when you're done for the day, you know, like when you're working out, to know when your body needs rest to actually recover, and not just keep working out because you want to hit a goal of like this or that. Like, you're going to injure yourself. You're going to gain too much muscle for your body to really handle. And that happens with a lot of people. Like, I've known a lot of former bodybuilders who then get injured, and they run the risk of having a heart attack, or they're overweight because their body couldn't metastasize that muscle after they stopped working out, and it just turned into fat. You know, and how hard that was for their body to actually, you know, reverse the process of being so bulky muscularly. And then this guy that I had worked with, he slipped a disc in his back and he was a power lifter, and he couldn't power lift anymore. And it had been a few years since he injured himself, 4 or 5 years, I think. And he was a big barrel-chested guy, but he was, you know, what we would call a kind of overweight guy. He was no longer really fit, and it was literally because he couldn't, like, it didn't just fall off as nothing. That muscle turned into weight, still a different type of weight, because he still had the appetite of when he was powerlifting, and because your body takes time to shift. And when we push ourselves, not that he was pushing himself too far, but obviously something was not aligned with what he was doing because he got hurt, right? And you'll find that if you push yourself too far, too hard, you get hurt. Or, you know, you overwork the paper, you know, when you're painting, if you're watercolor painting. Or you oversand the wood and you've got a divot, or you've pushed through the veneer. Or you think that, you know, you're laying down a layer of finish and you try to finish it too fast and you end up making it sticky. Or like if you're painting a car and you touch it too early because you're just really pressed to get that next coat, you know, and you touch it, now there's a fingerprint, and you've like, oh my gosh. I mean, even with your fingernails, if you're a girl and you are just in a rush to get your jacket on after you get your nails done, you know what I'm trying to say. Like, when you push yourself or you push those boundaries, you end up having a mistake or, you know, an imperfection somewhere. And I have just learned over the last couple of years through my compassion burnout and my, you know, I got injured and I haven't been able to do anything that I normally do that I love. And it's been such a process, you know, to understand that inner voice of when to push and when not to push. What is, you know, good for you to push through, you know, which pain is good to push through and which pain says stop. You know, which outside voice should you listen to and which outside voice should you tune out? Which form of discipline inside of your brain is actually healthy discipline? The discipline that tells you to keep moving is not always what you're supposed to listen to. And the discipline, oftentimes sitting still is so much harder than being busy, because being busy, we don't have to feel. And when we have to feel, we have to acknowledge like what other people are trying to make us feel. You know, like if I listened to everybody else, I would feel like kind of a loser. But instead of that, like I know when I'm finished with all of the things that I have moving forward, I'm going to have so much cool stuff that I have finished for myself that nobody else has. And it might take me a little longer to get there, but I will have all of these things. And whether or not I have them physically, I will have the skills to do them for myself. You know, like material possessions aren't anything. I've at times lost everything in my life. And I thought that was like the end of me. You know, that was really painful. But the truth is that the material world is just material. Like your inner world, your spiritual world, your mental world, your emotional world, those things, having them be safe and helpful and loving and, you know, full of understanding and wisdom and knowledge, those are the things that are important. Understanding how to work through things, understanding that things are just phases and you're supposed to move forward. Like, even in a relationship with the same person doesn't mean like, oh, I'm learning this and I'm with this person and now we're gonna break up and I'm gonna be with this person because I have a new thing to learn. It's like you learn things together and you move through phases of your relationship. Like when you see people who've been together for decades, they have the same love and admiration for each other, but they have been newlyweds and they have usually been parents and then they have been grandparents, and if not, they have been, you know, selfishly in love, and then they decided to, you know, they usually become community members of some type, and then they become mentors in that community. Like, if they really truly end up growing with each other, and growing in themselves, you find that brings them closer together, that their work outside of themselves brings them closer together, and they do it in a tandem way that works for them. It might be one, like one foot in front of the other, so one moves and then the other moves and then the other moves, or they work together and they, you know, they do it side by side. But those phases of growth correspond to the phases of growth in the relationship. And your phase of growth can't be controlled by anybody else. Like, we're all seeds that have been planted, and we're all just trying to bloom into the beautiful flowers we're supposed to be. And I think that, like, that's something that most people, you know, I didn't really know what I was going to talk about today, but I think it's turned out quite lovely. A lot of people are trying to look at you in your different stages of growth. Like, maybe you are, you know, something that blooms once in a lifetime. Maybe you bloom every year. Maybe you know, and they're looking at you before you've bloomed and they're trying to dictate who you are, and that's not cool. You know, are you a single flower? Are you a bush? You got lots of little things going on? Are you a single focused thing? Like, the existence of one flower doesn't negate the beauty of the existence of another flower. It takes all of the flowers in the garden to make the garden beautiful. And if they all bloomed at the same time, the gardener would have a really hard time taking care of the garden. And everything would be run amok. And I think that is, you know, something we're not really aware of in life. We're trying to all, you know, arrive at the same place at the same time. And that doesn't even work anyways. Like, how many concerts have to show us that trying to arrive at the same place at the same time is like a recipe for disaster, you know? We don't need to be pushing each other like that. We need to be propelling each other. We need to be encouraging each other. We need to be trying to make the world a better place, and not so, like, I'm not saying give everybody a pass to not learn or to not grow, but give them the space in which they can. You know, I mean, we're all guilty of not doing it correctly all the time. Like, we're human. Nobody does everything perfectly. Whatever. But the goal is to be the type of person that even offers correction in a way where a person can correct, you know, where they can fix the mistakes, where you hold them accountable to the things that they're repeating that they're not willing to look at, and holding them accountable in a way where it helps them confront that. Not just, you know, expelling your own pain of how they won't change onto them, but encouraging them to change because they're able to understand the type of pain that they're causing with their pervasive attitudes. I don't know. But anyways, back to the garden, back to all my stuff. When I am done with all of my skills becoming, you know, refined skills, and I think that's one of the reasons it's taking so long, is that, like, I have a lot of skills to refine, a lot of understanding and a lot of knowledge to put together to make my garden beautiful. And that's okay. Like, I wouldn't want to have so many things that I then had burnout, not just from giving compassion and not understanding, you know, my boundaries of what I can and cannot help. And, you know, if you've ever had compassion burnout, you really understand. I don't want to have burnout from life just in general. And this, setback, as most people would call it, but this time that I've had in being disabled and, needing to lay in bed and needing to kind of withhold myself from the world, has been so good for me. I'm not interested in doing the things that I used to do that were detrimental for my health, that were detrimental to my emotional and spiritual well-being. I don't miss them at all. I don't miss the things. I used to always feel like I was missing out because people were more welcomed in large groups than I was. And I don't anymore. A lot of my activities are single things, you know what I'm trying to say? Two people trying to work on a guitar at the same time doesn't work. Even when a lot of my activities are solo activities, and that's okay. I don't mind that. In fact, I really enjoy that. I do, want friends, obviously, right? But having friends and being accepted by a group of people is no longer such a large focus. It was something that, used to really affect and impact a lot of my day, and it doesn't anymore. I don't know, these are just, that time to really understand how to nourish and take care of myself and love on myself, and what I really like, what I don't like, what I'm good at, where I feel like I can grow is no longer dictated by other people's perspective necessarily, other people's understanding of who they think I am. And I think it's been a good thing for me, honestly. And not that I want anybody else to have to go through this long of a reset kind of, but I feel like it would be good for everybody to learn the things that I've learned. Not in the way that I had to learn them, obviously, but how to listen to your inner voice, that it's okay to take time and getting good at what you're supposed to get good at. When something tells you to, put it down and work on something else, it's not because you are failing at it. It's because to be awesome at it, you've got something else to learn. And then you can come back to it with this great skill set. Skills that I learned in my high school art classes are coming back to me to help me be a better artist now. And, those were things that I didn't want to put stock in. I had a really mean art teacher in high school. It made me give up on drawing and painting. That pushed me into photography. And now I'm getting back into that. I had also an altercation, a difference of opinion with my college art teacher that again pushed me away from drawing and painting, because it wasn't my career, but it is something that's part of my life. And I'll be interested to see, what it comes into. Why I'm doing this skill. What's it for? And that's kind of how I'm looking at things now. What's it for? Let's get good at this skill and see where it adds to something else. Why am I doing it this way and in this order? Not why can't I ever figure anything out? It's, okay, that's interesting. I got good at it. Let's see how this fits together, because it's all just one big puzzle now, without a picture. And I'm just kind of blind putting a puzzle together, and that's okay. Not everybody, hi, sweet pea. Not everybody, you want to come up? Oh, hi. Not everybody has, a clear path. You missed me too much. Not everybody has a clear path. And if we all did, then the world wouldn't be the way the world is. And I don't know. It takes all of us being our unique flowers and plants to be the garden of life, and to be happy and loving. And that's, I think, the goal, right? Is for all of us to be able to bloom in beautiful ways, for the harm to decrease, for the animosity and the conflict to decrease. Oh, yeah, okay. And for the love and compassion to reign supreme between all of us. And so I encourage you to let your flowers bloom, to take time in learning what it is you need to learn, to take it easy on yourself when you're trying to learn, and to understand that you're trying to put a puzzle together. And nobody else has, that picture. You have that picture, and when you're ready to see it, you'll see it. When it's ready to come together, it'll come together. And just as long as you are willing to love yourself and to work through the doubt and, the external I don't know, the way other people try to make you feel, the way other people try to see your story. When you let that go, you let that fall away, you can connect to the highest vision for your life and really understand why you are the way you are and love it. And I think that's the best part of life.